Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'avais manqué. Bruxelles, je t'aime. Bruxelles, je t'aime. T'es ma préférée. Bruxelles, je t'aime. Bruxelles, je t'aime.
Hello there and welcome to Brussels, my love, Euronews' weekly talk show where we break down the highs and lows of EU politics. I'm Maeve McMahon in Strasbourg, where MEPs met for their very first plenary session of 2025. Coming up, Donald Trump is back. This Monday saw the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States. It's not the Republican billionaire's first White House rodeo, but despite EU claims to be prepared, officials here are in a flap. The direct line to the Oval Office has disappeared overnight, with President Trump showing little respect for EU institutions and also the image of the EU on the world stage dwindling. We're asking how Brussels and Strasbourg will stay relevant. And Donald Tusk is in town. The Polish Prime Minister was in Strasbourg this week, calling for the EU to be united against the Kremlin. He said Russia was also planning major terror attacks on airlines across the world. With so many threats facing European security, not to mention the climate and the economy, we're asking what the former European Council chief can manage to achieve during his 6 months holding the EU's rotating presidency. A warm welcome to our guests this weekend. Mika Aaltola, Finnish centre-right MEP with the European People's Party. Abid Al-Salani, Swedish Liberal MEP with Renew Europe. And Virginijus Sinkevičius, Lithuanian MEP with the Greens. Thank you so much for being with us. But as always, before we hear your views, let's just hear what everyone in Strasbourg was talking about this week.
A new dawn has begun. Donald Trump is back in the Oval Office, completing the most stunning comeback in US history. Many in Europe are worried, but many are also jubilant. Unlike during Trump's first term, there are many more far-right parties in European governments today. Some predict a low point in transatlantic relations. But from Jimmy Carter to George W. Bush, from Ronald Reagan to Barack Obama, there's always been some friction with Washington. So what's on the cards this time?
Well, we've already had a good taste of what's in store, given the amount of executive orders already signed by President Trump. Abir, should the EU start fastening its seatbelt?
Well, we should have been prepared. I mean, we have had some time for us, and we already seen what his oligarchs are doing, the guys like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and all of these rich boys playing with the world order for their own benefits and their own interests. We should have been prepared and not be surprised and taken by surprise. And this is what we have been saying for a while. But unfortunately, the brakes have been hit because of different political agendas that we have inside the EU.
Same question to you, Mika?
Well, it wasn't a surprise, first of all. I think a lot of people were prepared. When Donald Trump was elected in 2016, it was a surprise to himself as well. Now it wasn't anymore. We know who he is, where he comes from, and his policy lines and his style of being overly emphasizing certain points to annoy us and to troll us. And, you know, his point is to make us leave the room. We should not leave the room, because he usually listens to the last person who remains in the room, and he remembers what he or she said.
And the same question to you. How are the Greens feeling?
Well, I think there is no surprise. Surprise was probably 2016. There were two surprises, Brexit and Trump. Now, more or less, we kind of know, and the actions that have been taken, withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, I think that hasn't surprised anyone. For Europe, our strategic goals should not change. It doesn't matter how elections in the US go. We need to ensure a competitive energy price. We need to ensure our energy independence from anyone outside Europe. We need to ensure that our companies are competitive, that our social fabric is working and delivering for people. And US is going to remain our ally. I hope they will have the same respect as we do to democratic institutions, to the rule of law, which in a way, bonds this transatlantic bond. We, of course, have to invest into the relations with the US because US is also changing. I lived in the US before, and even if you look through the surnames of Congress people, many of them, they had Polish, even Lithuanian surnames. Many of them would say that, you know, I have Irish roots, or my grandfather was fighting at the World War II here in Europe.
But that means
now
nothing
that bond is disappearing. So we also should not take this sort of friendship with the US for granted. And Trump's electoral speeches, they were very much oriented into domestic audience, and the actions that he is taking is very much oriented into domestic audience.
Of course, there was no message.
But if you check what he said, actually, he was saying that US is in decline. Brody report said that we are in decline. So there's commonalities when it comes to the kind of a democratic West. So we shouldn't see this as a separate incident. So the American elections, they resulted in one resolution, one solution to this problem that we are also feeling in here. We are in decline. The politics is not going very well here as well. So kind of using overly big words about strategic sovereignty, and now finally we are going to take...
And if you look at the White House website this week, it's transformed as well with big, bold writing everywhere, very clear messages, very slick communication style, something perhaps the Commission could copy and paste to make their style a little bit easier. But you mentioned Donald Trump's speech. We can actually take a listen to an excerpt from President Trump's speech that he delivered straight after his inauguration and swearing ceremony on Monday.
The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first.
Abir, did you tune into that speech?
Not really, because it's so fascinating to actually listen to Trump, because he's saying that he will make people respect America again and not be used. Well, America is actually have been acting as the world police and gaining a lot of money from it. They are gaining power, they're investing. It's not without a charge that they have been the world police. So it's so much bullshit in there, and I really don't understand how anyone who can read a book actually believe that guy. If the U.S. wants to be respected again, then it has to be part of the international order, not outside it.
But obviously, you can see this week he's been rolling back, signing a number of executive orders, rolling back on a lot of things that were signed in by Joe Biden.
But I think it's also done with the purpose, because if you look what he did, so for example, among those many things that he signed, he dismissed all CIA directors, which is a very serious move, which was overlooked by many other moves like Paris Agreement, like stating that there is two genders and so on. So I think, communication-wise, his team and himself is of course a genius, managing to hide important things under the things that irritates people. But if you look at the reality, and I relate very much to what has been said, look at the first term. Trump came with the tariffs agenda. So, for example, tariffs on steel, 25%. At the end of the term, guess how much jobs in the steel industry was created in the US? Minus 4,000 jobs. But if you look overall into the production, it was almost 20,000 jobs decline in the production rather than increase. So, I mean, his work did not prove anything than just a decline, and it
But he has
didn't
warned again
materialize.
this week that tariffs is his favourite word, and he will be coming thick and fast towards the European Union, slapping tariffs that will hurt our economy. Is the EU prepared? Do we have instruments and tools?
Well, he has been quiet about Europe, so we should remain in constant contact with him and those close to him.
Are you in contact with his administration?
Well, I know some people who are going to go into the administration, and I used to be a scholar, and I'm still a scholar whose main job was to follow US, and study American foreign policy, and this speech actually was in line with American presidents' speeches in similar situations. He was very proud of being American and seeing a future ahead, going to Mars and putting American flag there. So he was talking about expansion of US, also in territorial terms, but mostly when it comes to bringing the American might back, having that big stick that Europe lacks. And then being able to talk softer because he's listened to. And well, you know, Syria, the collapse of government, the deal in Gaza, all of those happened because the uncertainty that he's creating. And so people
He's created momentum. He has momentum. He has momentum.
No, he's actually creating gaps. That is the problem. Gaps of proper leadership, proper political leadership. What is happening in Syria, nobody knows. They just, you know, overthrow a dictatorship. We don't know. We don't know what's coming after. And the gap of political leadership means also that Syria is going to an unknown future. And the same is with the deal in Gaza and Israel. Do you know that already in the West Bank, the Israeli tractors are demolishing refugee camps already? It has not been even 5 days since the ceasefire deal was struck. And why is that? It's because Trump is in power, because there is no one who is actually asking the relevant question, putting these people accountable to anything.
But meanwhile, of course, he's answering the queries of his voters and his MAGA supporters. But you mentioned something interesting, which is you're trying to reach out, of course, to the Trump administration, make friends there. But you didn't get an invite to the big event.
Well, I didn't. Usually not many European politicians or leaders are invited. Italian Prime Minister was there, and of course that is one link that we could use in here. We have to use all the channels that we have, because US economy for us is so vital, and also when it comes to energy in Europe, security on multiple sectors. Well, look, America is something that we cannot replace, and you know, when you're talking about European sovereignty, strategic sovereignty with bold words, you're actually using Trump's words. But Trump is doing things. He brought manufacturing jobs back to US as well. They increased also during Biden years, and the economy is doing very well compared to Europe. So there are quite a lot of things that we could learn from.
Well, there is a feeling of Trumpism.
I think you're absolutely wrong here. If you look at the numbers, the manufacturing jobs decreased during the Trump's term. Renewable energy has increased, which he hated. So one thing is the speeches that are oriented into people. And, you know, I agree very much that the speech was oriented into bring this spirit up, which we cannot compare European Union and the United States, because, you know, Europe is a unique project of 27 different countries.
A project that he has no respect for,
with a different history.
But a project that the President of the United States has zero respect for.
I don't want to underestimate us, because you cannot also go around Europe. He needs Europe
but that's
as
exactly
equally
what he will be doing.
as Europe needs US.
That's right.
And therefore, I wouldn't be so dramatic. LNG, for example, that Trump is saying that now, you know, he signed the orders to increase extraction. It's no secret, in Europe we still need gas. The transition didn't happen yet, energy one. So if that it is going to secure and help certain member states to get the gas cheaper, I think it's only, you know, a win for us. Cheaper households prices for heating for people, and more competitive price for the industry. I see.
And I think this is how we should have to be acting in the EU. You know, cooperate where we can cooperate, when it's to our benefit, but also take our global responsibility as being political leaders. But when it comes to economics, trade, I think that we should, you know, do the best out of it and see where we can also help the good things happening in, like, you know, the green transition in the US, and try there to benefit from it and to help them also transit.
Well, I think the key to European success with Trump is to return to the geopolitical roots of the European Union. When Winston Churchill was giving that famous Zurich speech, he was talking about European integration in terms of containing Russia and stopping the spread of communism. That is something that we should return to. And then we have some respect when we have defense and when we have power. Right now, nobody is listening to us, and that's the problem of European
Nobody's
Union.
listening to us, and President Trump, for his part, he's listening to the European Conservatives and Reformists. You said Giorgia Meloni, of course, the Italian Prime Minister, was at that inauguration. Among Europeans, we saw the former Prime Minister of Poland, Mateusz Morawiecki, taking a selfie of himself there on Monday, showing really the privileged relationship the European Conservatives and Reformists, the party here in the Parliament, have. I guess the concern as well is how this could impact us here in Europe, these connections that President Trump has.
But I mean, you see it, who did Elon Musk invite to his platform? It wasn't a liberal. So, I mean, these are very much, these ideologies are very much connected, and they will ride on each other's waves. And I mean, you see it already. In the plenary, we have mini Trumps sitting there on the right side of the House, applauding when Europe is failing, when people are killed, when people are oppressed, they're applauding. And this is exactly what he will use, these useful idiots that we have inside here.
I think what's very important here to note one thing, that nobody cannot intervene into elections and into democratic processes in Europe, in EU, but also in the member states. And doesn't matter, you are Vladimir Putin or you are Elon Musk. Democratic principles apply, and we have to defend democracy, because this is what our EU is built on those fundamental values.
But these values are being challenged. They are inviting Elon Musk to as a nominee for the prize. I mean, they do not. That is the problem. But we have people inside this house are not subscribing to the democratic values and principles.
It's nothing
But
new,
he
no?
wasn't given that prize.
In politics,
Anyhow,
you always
he was
have
among the three.
people that not necessarily, let's say, support even the democratic institutions that they were elected into to represent. But I think, you know, here the most important thing is to ensure that our legislation is respected. When we talk about DSA, for example, there's huge debate now,
the Digital
and
Services Act,
which is being trying to put that it's some sort of fact-checking versus basically, you know, killing the freedom of speech, which is not true. You know, facts and freedom of speech has two different, completely two different.
According to the European legislation, there's multiple alternatives that the platforms can use,
we've heard now from the politicians. I also want to bring in some voices from the streets. We were out in Brussels turning the Euronews microphone to locals there to find out how they feel about 4 more years of President Trump in the Oval Office.
Tout ce qu'il promet, il le fait.
Everything he promises, he delivers, whether it's good for some or bad for others. But he's a straightforward person, and I like him for that.
Pour ça, je l'aime bien.
It's dangerous to have such a president of the United States, which is the most powerful person in this world. So it's quite frightening.
I'm not really happy about it. So about like immigration, about how it feels like about racism also.
Je suis pour l'élection de Trump.
I'm in favor of Trump's election, not because of the character he is, but because of his approach to the US economy. And I think we should follow his example.
On devrait prendre exemple.
I would rather say that I'm more worried than anything else in terms of what could be the implication of the new US foreign policy.
Tout va pas plaire.
Not everything is going to please, that's for sure. But no pain, no gain. If we talk about war, I think Trump is here to prevent us from having a war.
So mixed bag there of opinions. Some saying we should.
Well, I think, you know, it resonates in Europe as well. Let's be honest that we have political forces here that are very sympathetic to what Donald Trump represents. So it's not Europe versus US. We are common society. After all, we uphold the same democratic principles. Some are more conservative, some are more liberal. And we somehow have to find resolutions to these situations. And pragmatically, like what Donald Trump said, we have to find the common sense. And it needs to be redefined in every time, perhaps in a little bit different ways, because the world is changing. Russia is attacking Europe right now. That's the main challenge we have. Donald Trump might be a problem or might be a promise. We have to see how this carries out. What is the resolution?
So I think, I mean, him he has not even started to breathe the oxygen in the Oval Room, and he already cut all development aid. He had a 90 days gag rule on all development aid. Only that showcases what kind of leadership he's showing. But I do subscribe to the notion that we need to cooperate with the US, we need to strengthen our own competitiveness, and we need to work with them where we can without undermining the global order, without undermining international order, without undermining our own democratic institutions. That is the most important thing. And implementation, enforcement of EU law will be essential here.
It's always about implementation. That's always the tricky one. But of course, we saw President Trump as well this week pull out of the WHO, the Paris Agreement, as you said, and also the OECD, which is a tax deal which took years of negotiations as well to get over the line.
But that's exactly what I think is actually sending a wrong signal. And on the other hand, it probably gives an opportunity to Europe, because there are many companies, including European companies. Siemens, together with the Spanish company, they believe that IRA is going to be there and invested 500 million to build turbines for wind power. That's not going to happen anymore because Trump is revoking IRA. So many businesses that focusing on clean tech and innovation, now they feel fooled and not being welcomed. So
and
I
on
think
that positive point
a bit
for
of
anyone
opportunity for us as well.
And on that positive point, we can bring this conversation to a close. Thank you so much to our panel. And you stay with us here on Euronews, because soon we'll be back to discuss another Donald who's making headlines here. That's Poland's Prime Minister, Donald Tusk. So see you very soon here on Euronews. Welcome back to Brussels, my love, Euronews' weekly talk show. I'm Maeve McMahon, broadcasting from the European Parliament here in Strasbourg. Now, if you're a regular viewer, you will be well informed that Poland has picked up the EU presidency role from Hungary. And with that chairing job also comes the obligation of showing up here in Strasbourg and going face-to-face with MEPs. That's why this week we saw the Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, take centre stage to set out his plan for the next 6 months. Donald Tusk had a very clear message for the hemicycle. His tone was positive and one of reassurance. Take a listen.
Europe is, Europe was, and Europe will always be great.
In order to paraphrase John Fitzgerald
Kennedy'ego, ask not what America can do for Europe and its security. Ask what we ourselves can do for it. If
Europe is to survive, it must be armed. It's not our choice. I'm not a militarist. If we want to avoid revisiting history, don't play down the appeal to spend 5% of GDP.
So Donald Tusk there with a rather reassuring message. Mika, were you in the room listening to the speech? How did it go down with MEPs?
Well, it was a good speech, and he was proud about Europe. He was almost Trumpian in the terms. Europe was great, and it is always going to be great. We have to be confident, and we have to assert that confidence as well. And if you don't have the military power, then you don't wield that big stick. And nobody is going to listen to you.
And is that a lesson perhaps for mainstream politicians to be more Trumpian, if you like, or more populist in their messaging to get the message across?
I don't think so. I do believe that substance will triumph the populism. But I think that we really do need to simplify our messaging as politicians, because often we talk above the heads of the people,
exactly.
And especially if you're saying, I mean, only today, I needed to ask my political advisor, what the hell is it in this email? It was full of, short and big, like.
And we're in an era of TikTok and Instagram where people's attention spans are quite low. But were you in that room for that speech?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it was a good speech. I don't want to call it Trumpian, because there were many great speeches delivered before Trump. I think, what's very important with the Polish presidency that Poland sees very well the challenges Europe is facing. That's why security is the key issue, what presidency is going to be about. And it's really the time to step up our defensive efforts, especially when we talk about the Baltic Sea. We see the actions of possible sabotages continues on the critical infrastructure, but also continuous cyber attacks and etc. So definitely we have to stand tall, and I think that was a good speech.
And Abir, do you feel in safe hands with Donald Tusk now steering the ship for the next 6 months, especially if you look across Germany and France? The leaders were meeting this week, but obviously they're both in big trouble domestically.
Well, I listened also to his speech very carefully, and it felt good listening to him, and especially his closing remarks, where he actually got standing ovations for a very long time because he could shut up the far right, who were constantly hacking, you know, like hating on the EU, on Europe, on our common values. And he could, you know, just snap them off. But when it comes to what the next 6 months can be, I do believe it will be very important for him to revise his position when it comes to the Green Deal, where he has been very critical, because I think if there is something that can be of importance for our competitiveness, it's the Green Deal and the transition towards a better climate policy.
Well, that indeed impacts your party a lot, of course.
I think here, on one hand, if you take Tusk by himself, of course, it's probably one of the best CVs that you can have at that position. On the other hand, when you talk about, for example, Green Deal, I'm pretty sure that, again, it can be renamed in any other way. But
how should it be called?
It doesn't matter how it's going to be called. The most important what it has to reach. The goals are the most important. The branding doesn't matter. Branding, what matters is this is what Donald Trump sometimes tries to reach with
and right now the green band is not working. That's why the Greens did so badly in the elections.
To me, it doesn't really matter. The most important is to reach the goal.
Well, you know, it just tells you something about the momentum that it has shifted. And now when geopolitics is all of a sudden an existential issue, I firmly believe that...
And so is the climate, if you look at the science.
Well, it is as well, and it is there.
But there's no sense of urgency to address it.
But the European competitiveness is based on the Green Deal or Clean Deal progressing as smoothly as possible. But we know, look, we need to invest after years and years of peace dividend and cashing in, investing on other matters. We need to now invest into defense. And one question I could ask is that where did that peace dividend money go? Because Europe has been in steady decline when it comes to economy, competitiveness, and politics as well. So that cashing in into the defense money didn't go very well. So let's invest, reinvest.
But our voters on board, Abir, with this. And when you tell your voters we need to get armed, we need to get militarized societies, we need to start spending in defense and cutting on hospitals and education.
Again, this is the difference between us and the US. We are not a federation. We don't have a federal system. We are 27 different member states with our unique national competences that I do believe are stated now in the treaty, and I do believe it's very important to respect. Not giving Brussels more power, that will really backlash. So what I believe is that creating 27 strong member states that cooperate, that are in very close negotiations about how to, you know, who takes what and how to do when it comes to defense.
And of course, 23 are NATO members.
The spending on defense didn't happen. So let's look at the numbers. It just didn't happen. Poland is a good example,
well, Poland is a good
which reaches higher numbers, but only now. The most important thing when we speak about our economy declining or competitiveness declining is, first of all, what it was based on, and it was based on fossil fuels. Firstly, fossil fuels from Russia, gas from Russia. Too many countries, our industry powerhouse Germany has built its whole industry on the cheap Russian gas. And since Russia attacked Ukraine, it disappeared.
But that was
the fundamental mistake. And that's why we need to continue. Green, clean deal, the best deal. The best deal for Europe is to ensure our strategic autonomy in energy. And that can be done.
And while you think of a good new name for that deal, we can bring this conversation to a close. Thank you so much to our panellists for being with us here. And thank you so much for watching. Stay with us here on Euronews. Hello there and welcome to Brussels, my love, your News' weekly chat show. I'm Maeve McMahon here in Strasbourg, sitting down with MEPs Mika Aaltola, a Conservative from Finland, Abid Al-Salani, a Liberal Swede, and Virginijus Sinkevicius, a Lithuanian Green MEP. And among MEPs here was also the European Commission President. She's back on her feet after a bad dose of pneumonia. But Ursula von der Leyen started her week in the Swiss skiing village of Davos, where the World Economic Forum is taking place. Every year, CEOs, investors, big tech and politicians flock to the tiny Swiss town to talk politics, make business deals and network and party at some of the most exclusive gatherings of the year. A night in a hotel in Davos can set you back by a couple of €1,000, prompting criticism that the WEF is an elitist party just for the rich. Eva Majdel, a Bulgarian MEP and regular Davos goer, tells us it's worth every single penny in order to mix both the private and public sector.
I've been always very grateful to work on the AI Act with my colleagues and to be able to continue those conversations beyond the European Parliament and beyond the so-called Brussels bubble. Davos is a place where some of those conversations become more global, and we can see the way EU position itself in the world. Why do I say this? Is because very often as Europeans, we like to look at Europe from inside.
So, one of your colleagues there, Eva Majdel, a Bulgarian MEP from the European People's Party from your group, who goes every year. Abir, would you like to be in Davos?
It's amazing how one who wants to skip the Brussels bubbles goes to the Davos bubbles instead. I'm sorry, but I mean, kudos to her if she enjoys going there and she thinks that she's bringing the conversation outside and, you know...
But she has a point. I mean, the reputation of the European Union in Davos is very negative. The European Union is seen as regulators while everyone else is seen as these big innovators. So is it not a good idea to show up?
Well, somebody, but I mean, the house is open here, so they are very welcome. They can invite us to their companies if they have any, you know, any kind of questions. But the thing is that they always say that it is about, you know, combating poverty and, you know, bringing the most poor on board and, you know, creating wealth for everyone. Still, the discussion is never about how do we use then the development aid? Where are we putting our money? How are we going to reach the global development goals? I mean, who is doing what? Why are the governments cutting? Why is the EU cutting down on its development aid and using it to, you know, to migration deals instead? So, I mean, being philanthropic, it's nice for the moment, maybe, and go party, but the real discussion is not even held.
What would your thoughts be? Is it just an elite club for the rich?
You know, I've attended Davos a few times as commissioner, been there.
Did you party till dawn?
No, I didn't party, but I'm not a party animal, so that's not something applies to me. But the good thing is there, of course, that there are many CEOs, world leaders that are at one place, and you can have the full agenda of meetings during the day, and you can meet different people, of having a very clear agenda, and this is what I was usually doing there.
Indeed, you can get more work done there in a couple of days than you could perhaps over a year.
Exactly. So
everyone is there.
You don't need.
And if you're a head of state, you can party till dawn without the glare of the national media on you. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that partying side is not very sustainable. I usually go to sleep at 9 o'clock, so
we're very sensible MEPs here today.
I would skip that part of it, but networking, of course, is useful, and that exclusivity and elitistic nature brings some benefits. But of course, it is seen in the eyes of many as something that is perhaps a little bit sinful part of the contemporary global times that we are living in.
The rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, as Oxfam put out in their reports this week. But Ursula von der Leyen, as I said, the European Commission President, was there this week at the start of the week, and she said on her social media it's a great place to catch up with others. And she also gave a very straight-talking speech with some hidden messages for President Trump. Take a listen.
The rules of engagement between global powers are changing. We should not take anything for granted. And while some in Europe may not like this new reality, we are ready to deal with it.
So Ursula von der Leyen there saying that the EU can do business with other parts of the world, that it's a gigantic market and a rules-based powerhouse. And she made the front page of a lot of European newspapers. So It was probably worth her trip and her expensive hotel.
Oh, definitely. I love the confidence that she's showing. I love that she's putting EU as a global leader. I hope that she can match that with a leadership when it comes to human rights, when it comes to, you know, sanctioning countries that are violating international order and international law, and, you know, making EU member states follow the ICC orders, for example. Just a tiny example.
Well, I think what she was actually talking about was the rule-based world order, that we cannot take it for granted anymore, and it is changing, and the rules are changing. So what world are we living in?
So we need to change. That was her message as well.
Yes.
She also made it clear that her commission will be heading off to India very soon, sending a message to the Trump administration that the EU is open to doing business with other parts of the world.
Well, I think the most important part is also here to protect the world order that was so difficult, in such difficulty built after the Second World War, and now is being threatened. First of all, by the evil axis, which is formed by Russia, North Korea, that, you know, Iran, that exactly that openly supporting war in Ukraine, and this is not an easy task for us. And we, of course, need to unite our forces with the US, and hopefully they are there. But if not, then we need to also look globally for partners to face these difficulties.
And meanwhile, fix issues internally with a lot of divisions as well and disunity here. Will we see?
With the Mercosur,
but that's part of the democratic process. And it's not necessarily that I will always agree with other opinions, but I will never put a restriction on them. And I think that's the biggest difference that we have. I will always tackle false and lies. I will always tackle...
Well, I mean, let's start, for example, with, you know, initiating or finalize Mercosur negotiations. Let's start with all these deals that we have that are just lying there and waiting to be signed, sealed, and delivered. I think that if we can manage to do that, then we are a very good step ahead.
As Avir Atsalani said earlier, it's all about implementation. We will have to bring this very interesting conversation to a close. Thank you so much to our MEPs for being with us here. If you want any more information on any of the stories we've touched on today, please check out our website, euronews.com. But thank you so much for watching. Do also reach out to Brussels, my love, at euronews.com. We'll always get back to you with your queries and your points. Thanks for watching. Take care.